The Quiet Storm. It was a humid summer morning at New York's JFK International Airport. Travelers bustled through the terminal, dragging suitcases and juggling phones as announcements blared overhead. Simone Avery sat quietly near Gate 42, her laptop balanced on her knees as she reviewed the last-minute details for her next business meeting. Simone, a striking woman in her early 40s, exuded quiet confidence. Her dark, coiled hair framed her face, and her sharp brown eyes scanned the document before her. Though dressed simply in a tailored blazer and jeans, Simone's aura suggested more than what met the eye. To an onlooker, she might seem like an ordinary passenger, a mother, perhaps, or a mid-level manager on a routine trip. What no one knew was that Simone Avery was a self-made billionaire. She had built her company, Nexus Tech, from scratch, creating groundbreaking innovations in renewable energy. But she never flaunted her wealth, preferring to stay low-key. This trip was no different. She was flying to Dallas for a critical partnership meeting with a major energy firm. To Simone, it was another notch in her routine, but the events that would unfold on this flight would become far from ordinary. As boarding was announced, Simone calmly closed her laptop, slipped it into her bag, and joined the line for first-class passengers. The line moved quickly, and within minutes she was seated in 3A, a window seat at the front of the plane. The faint hum of the plane's air conditioning filled the cabin, and a few passengers filtered in, filling up the first-class section. The cabin crew bustled about, preparing for takeoff. Simone noticed one flight attendant in particular, Cheryl, who seemed to move with purpose, her sharp eyes scanning the cabin like a hawk. Cheryl's blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her crisp uniform was immaculate. Yet, something in her demeanor felt cold, as if she was ready to pounce on the slightest infraction. Simone barely paid her any attention. Her focus was on preparing for the meeting ahead, her notebook open on her lap, filled with handwritten notes and ideas. She was mid-thought when Cheryl approached her row. "Ma'am," Cheryl said, her tone curt, "please fasten your seatbelt. The sign has been on for a while now." Simone blinked, slightly startled by the abruptness. "Oh, of course," she replied, quickly buckling her seatbelt. Cheryl lingered, her gaze scrutinizing Simone in a way that felt uncomfortable. "It's important to follow instructions," she added, her voice firm. Simone's eyes met Cheryl's. "I understand," she replied politely, though the implication behind Cheryl's tone wasn't lost on her. The exchange was brief, but it left a strange tension in the air. The flight took off without further incident, and Simone tried to refocus on her work. She ordered a coffee from another flight attendant, who brought it with a polite smile. But as the plane settled into cruising altitude, Cheryl returned. This time, she approached Simone with a tray of refreshments. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" Cheryl asked, her tone professional but icy. "Just water, please," Simone said, offering a polite smile. Cheryl handed her the water but seemed to hesitate before moving on. "Are you sure that's all you need?" she asked, her tone laced with a hint of something Simone couldn't quite place. Condescension. Disdain. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you," Simone replied, her patience wearing thin. Cheryl gave a tight smile and walked away. Simone couldn't shake the feeling that Cheryl was singling her out, though she couldn't figure out why. It wasn't uncommon for people to misjudge her. Her modest appearance often led others to underestimate her, but something about Cheryl's behavior felt more pointed. As the flight progressed, Cheryl's subtle jabs continued. When Simone asked for a napkin, Cheryl brought it with a forced smile, saying, "I didn't realize you needed one earlier." When Simone adjusted her seat, Cheryl commented on how important it was to respect the comfort of others. Simone said nothing, choosing to let the moment slide. But inside, she felt a growing unease. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but the pattern was undeniable. Cheryl's behavior wasn't just rude, it was targeted. Across the aisle, another first-class passenger, a middle-aged man in a business suit, observed the interactions with growing discomfort. He glanced at Simone with a look of sympathy but said nothing. Most people in situations like this preferred to avoid confrontation. Simone's thoughts raced. Should she speak up? Should she ask Cheryl directly what the issue was? Or should she let it go? Years of experience had taught her to pick her battles carefully. But this felt different. It wasn't just about her. It was about the principle of respect, something Simone valued deeply. The turning point came when Cheryl made a comment loud enough for other passengers to hear. As Simone leaned forward to retrieve her laptop bag from under the seat, Cheryl walked by and said, "It's always important to come prepared when traveling." Simone froze. The implication was clear. Cheryl was insinuating that Simone wasn't prepared or didn't belong in first class. The comment stung, not because it was true, but because of the audacity behind it. It was then that Simone decided enough was enough. She straightened up, her mind made up. She wasn't going to let this slide, not this time. Simone pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her husband, Marcus. "Something's off with one of the flight attendants. She's being rude, almost hostile. Not sure if it's personal or something else, but I'm documenting this." Marcus, a sharp and strategic thinker, was also the CEO of one of the largest airline groups in the country, a fact Simone rarely mentioned unless absolutely necessary. But in this moment, she realized it might come into play. Marcus's response was swift. "Noted. Stay calm. I'll handle it." Simone felt a wave of calm wash over her. Marcus was the kind of person who didn't make empty promises. If he said he'd handle it, he meant it. But Simone also knew she couldn't sit back passively. She needed to stand up for herself, not just for her own dignity, but for anyone else who had been treated unfairly. As the plane soared above the clouds, Simone began to write. She documented every interaction with Cheryl in detail, noting the times and the exact words exchanged. She wasn't sure how this would play out, but she wanted to be prepared. In the meantime, Cheryl continued her rounds, oblivious to the storm brewing. She smiled at other passengers, engaged in small talk, and acted as though nothing was amiss. But every now and then, Simone caught Cheryl glancing in her direction, her expression unreadable. Simone stayed composed, her exterior calm and poised, even as her thoughts swirled. She knew this flight was about to take a dramatic turn, and she was ready for whatever came next. Little did Cheryl know, the woman she had underestimated was not just another passenger. Simone Avery was about to remind everyone on that plane, especially Cheryl, that respect was non-negotiable. The spark ignites. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the plane cruised at 35,000 feet. Simone adjusted her seat slightly, her notebook still open on her lap. She was focused outwardly, but inside, her thoughts churned. Cheryl's behavior had gone from annoying to outright unacceptable. Simone wasn't one to let petty actions or snide remarks get under her skin, but this felt deeper, more deliberate. The other passengers in first class had noticed too. A young couple seated a few rows behind Simone exchanged glances after Cheryl's latest interaction. The man whispered something to his partner, who nodded, looking equally uncomfortable. Still, no one said a word. In situations like these, it was easier for people to stay silent, avoiding conflict and hoping the tension would blow over. But Simone wasn't like most people. Years of building her company had taught her that letting disrespect slide only emboldened those who dished it out. It was clear Cheryl had judged her, dismissed her as unimportant. Simone wasn't sure if it was because of her understated appearance, her calm demeanor, or something else entirely. What she did know was that Cheryl needed to be held accountable. As the flight attendants began preparing for meal service, Simone decided she wouldn't let this situation define the rest of her flight. She took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and resolved to stay professional, no matter what happened next. But just as she was finding her balance, Cheryl returned to her row. "We're serving lunch," Cheryl said, her tone clipped. She handed Simone a menu without making eye contact, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Simone glanced at the menu and responded politely. "I'll have the grilled chicken salad, please." Cheryl scribbled the order down, her face expressionless. "Very well," she said, before turning to the next passenger. Simon couldn't help but notice that Cheryl's tone softened when she addressed the man across the aisle. The disparity was glaring. Cheryl's demeanor was warm and accommodating with others, but cold and dismissive toward Simone. The pattern was undeniable now. Simone's patience, already worn thin, began to crumble. When the meal arrived, Cheryl placed Simone's tray on the table without a word. The plate wobbled slightly, spilling some of the dressing onto the tray. Cheryl didn't apologize or even acknowledge the mishap. Instead, she moved on. As if nothing had happened, Simone set the tray aside for a moment and pressed the call button. A different flight attendant, a younger woman named Jamie, arrived within seconds. Jamie had a friendly demeanor, her light brown eyes radiating concern. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" Jamie asked, her voice kind. "Yes, thank you," Simone said. "I just wanted to let you know that the dressing spilled when the tray was placed down. Could I get a napkin, please?" Jamie nodded quickly. "Of course. I'll get that for you right away." Within moments, Jamie returned with a fresh napkin and even offered to replace the tray. Her professionalism was a stark contrast to Cheryl's behavior. Simone thanked her and declined the replacement, deciding to make do with what she had. But the incident only cemented Simone's growing frustration. Cheryl's lack of basic courtesy wasn't just bad service, it was deliberate. As Simone finished her meal, she noticed Cheryl moving down the aisle, chatting with passengers. Her laughter rang out, light and cheerful, a stark contrast to the cold, clipped tone she used with Simone. Cheryl's smile disappeared entirely when she glanced in Simone's direction. It was as if she couldn't bear to acknowledge her presence. Simone couldn't stay silent anymore. She reached for her phone and typed out another message to Marcus. "It's getting worse. She's ignoring me outright now. I'll document everything, but this is unacceptable." Marcus's response came almost instantly. "Understood. I'm escalating this to the airline's executive team. Just stay calm." Simone felt a wave of reassurance. Marcus had a way of handling things decisively, and she knew he wouldn't let this slide. Still, she wasn't about to sit idly by. She had always believed in taking a stand, and this situation was no different. The turning point came about halfway through the flight. Cheryl was passing through the cabin with a tray of coffee when another passenger accidentally bumped her arm. The jolt caused one of the cups to tip, spilling hot coffee onto Cheryl's uniform. She gasped, her expression twisting in annoyance as she turned toward the passenger, an older man seated 2 rows behind Simone. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Cheryl snapped, her voice sharp. "You need to be more careful." The man apologized profusely, but Cheryl waved him off with a dismissive gesture. Her reaction drew the attention of several passengers, who exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear Cheryl's patience was wearing thin, and her professionalism was slipping. Simone watched the scene unfold, her lips pressed into a thin line. Cheryl's outburst was uncalled for, but it also revealed something deeper, a lack of respect for the people she was supposed to serve. When Cheryl finally reached Simone's row again, Simone decided it was time to speak up. "Excuse me," Simone said, her tone calm but firm. Cheryl stopped, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes," she replied, her voice edged with impatience. "I couldn't help but notice the way you've been interacting with me compared to other passengers," Simone began. "Is there a reason for the difference in tone and treatment?" Cheryl blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her voice defensive. "I treat all passengers the same." Simone raised an eyebrow. "I respectfully disagree. Your tone and demeanor have been noticeably different when speaking to me. I'd like to understand why." Cheryl's cheeks flushed, and she glanced around nervously, aware that other passengers were now paying attention. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this. I have duties to attend to," she said, her voice tight. Simone didn't back down. "I understand you're busy, but this is important. I expect to be treated with the same level of respect as everyone else on this flight." Cheryl opened her mouth to respond but seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her stiff posture betraying her irritation. The tension in the cabin was palpable now. Several passengers glanced at Simone with looks of quiet admiration. The man across the aisle gave her a subtle nod, as if to say, "Well done." Simone felt a surge of determination. Speaking up was never easy, especially in public, but it was necessary. She had learned long ago that silence only allowed bad behavior to persist. As the flight continued, Cheryl avoided Simone's row entirely, delegating any interactions to Jamie. Simone didn't mind. Jamie's professionalism and kindness were a welcome change, but the damage had already been done. Cheryl's behavior had left an indelible mark, not just on Simone, but on everyone who had witnessed it. Simone leaned back in her seat, her mind racing. She wasn't sure how this situation would resolve, but one thing was clear: she wasn't going to let it slide. Respect was a non-negotiable value, and Cheryl's actions had crossed a line. For the remainder of the flight, Simone documented everything meticulously, preparing for the steps she knew would come next. Marcus was already involved, and she trusted him to handle the situation at the highest level. But Simone also knew she had a role to play in ensuring that this incident wouldn't be swept under the rug. As the plane began its descent, Simone felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, determination, and a quiet sense of resolve. This wasn't just about her. It was about setting a standard, about reminding people like Cheryl that every passenger deserved dignity and respect, regardless of how they looked or what assumptions others might make about them. Simone didn't know it yet, but this flight was about to spark a conversation that would ripple far beyond the confines of the plane. Cheryl's behavior had ignited a spark, and Simone was ready to fan the flames of change. The calm before the storm. The plane began its descent, and the usual cabin announcements filled the air. Passengers started shifting in their seats, preparing for landing, but Simone's mind was elsewhere. Her hands rested on her lap, her fingers still gripping her pen. She had spent the last hour writing a detailed account of the incidents with Cheryl, capturing every nuance, every sharp word, every dismissive gesture. The more she wrote, the more it became clear this wasn't just about her. Simone glanced out the window at the sprawling Dallas skyline, its towers glinting in the sunlight. Normally, this sight would fill her with a sense of purpose. Another city, another step forward in her mission to innovate and improve lives. But today, her thoughts were clouded by the lingering weight of the morning's events. The landing was smooth, but the tension in the first-class cabin hadn't dissipated. Cheryl avoided Simone's row altogether during the final rounds, ensuring Jamie handled all remaining passenger needs. Simone noticed Cheryl's rigid posture and the way her jaw tightened whenever their eyes met briefly. The flight attendant was clearly aware she had pushed too far, but her pride wouldn't allow her to acknowledge it. As the plane taxied to the gate, Simone turned on her phone. A new message from Marcus popped up almost immediately. "Marcus, the airline's VP of Customer Relations will meet you at the gate. Stay composed. This is being addressed at the highest level." Simone let out a quiet sigh of relief. Marcus's efficiency was unmatched, and she trusted him implicitly. Still, she couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety. Confrontation was never comfortable, even for someone as composed as Simone. But this wasn't about comfort. It was about principle. When the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began standing to gather their belongings. Simone stayed seated for a moment, observing the flurry of movement. Jamie approached her row with a warm smile, her tone genuine. "Thank you for flying with us, Ms. Avery," Jamie said softly. "I hope the rest of your day goes well." "Thank you, Jamie," Simone replied, her voice equally kind. "You've been wonderful." Jamie gave a small nod and moved on to assist another passenger. Simone stood and retrieved her carry-on from the overhead compartment. She deliberately took her time, letting the other passengers disembark first. Cheryl hovered near the galley, her expression unreadable. Simone caught her eye briefly, but Cheryl quickly looked away. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. As Simone exited the plane, She was greeted by a sharply dressed woman waiting at the gate. Her name tag read Victoria Green, VP of Customer Relations. Victoria extended a hand, her expression warm but professional. "Ms. Avery, welcome to Dallas," Victoria said. "My name is Victoria Green, and I've been informed of your experience on today's flight. May I speak with you privately for a moment?" "Of course," Simone replied, shaking Victoria's hand firmly. Victoria led Simone to a quiet seating area near the terminal windows. The hustle and bustle of the airport created a buffer of noise, ensuring their conversation remained private. Simone sat down, setting her bag beside her, while Victoria pulled out a small notebook and pen. "First, let me apologize on behalf of the airline," Victoria began. "We strive to provide exceptional service to all our passengers, and it's clear we fell short today. I'd like to hear about your experience in detail, so we can address it appropriately." Simone nodded, appreciating the sincerity in Victoria's tone. She began recounting the series of events, starting with Cheryl's curt remarks about the seatbelt, and moving through each subtle slight and overt dismissal. Simone described Cheryl's tone, her body language, and the stark difference in how she treated other passengers compared to Simone. Victoria listened intently, her pen moving rapidly across the page. She didn't interrupt, letting Simone speak freely. When Simone finished, Victoria looked up, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Ms. Avery," Victoria said. "I can assure you that this behavior does not align with our company's values. Cheryl's actions were unprofessional, and we will be addressing them directly." Simone nodded, but her expression remained calm. "I appreciate that, Victoria. But this isn't just about me. It's about setting a standard. Passengers shouldn't have to feel judged or dismissed based on someone's assumptions." "You're absolutely right," Victoria replied. "We take matters like this very seriously, and I assure you there will be consequences. Additionally, we'd like to offer you a formal apology and a gesture of goodwill for the inconvenience you've experienced." Simone held up a hand, stopping Victoria mid-sentence. "I'm not here for compensation," she said firmly. "What I want is accountability. I want to know that steps are being taken to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Victoria's eyes softened. "Understood, Ms. Avery. Your feedback will directly inform our next steps, both with Cheryl and with our broader training programs. I'll personally oversee this matter." Simone gave a small nod. "That's all I ask." As their conversation wrapped up, Victoria stood and extended her hand once more. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Ms. Avery. I'll keep you updated on how we proceed." Simone shook her hand. "Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate your time." Victoria walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and Simone was left alone for a moment. She stared out at the runway, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. The conversation had gone as well as she could have hoped, but the weight of the morning's events still lingered. Simone's phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. "Marcus, call me when you're settled. I have more updates." Simone smiled faintly, her husband's unwavering support a constant source of strength. She picked up her bag and began walking toward the exit, her mind already shifting to the next steps. Outside, a sleek black car waited for her. The driver, a polite young man, opened the door as she approached. "Ms. Avery, I'm here to take you to your hotel," he said. "Thank you," Simone replied, sliding into the back seat. The door closed with a soft click, and the car pulled away from the curb. As the city skyline blurred past the window, Simone's thoughts drifted. This wasn't over. Not yet. Cheryl's behavior was a symptom of a larger issue, one that couldn't be solved with a single conversation or an apology. Change required action, and Simone was prepared to see it through. She opened her phone and began drafting an email to Marcus. The subject line was simple but powerful. Next steps. Accountability and change. Simone didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This flight was just the beginning. The echoes of change. As Simone settled into the plush leather seat of the car, her mind remained a whirl of thoughts. She leaned back, staring out at the bustling streets of Dallas. The driver navigated through the afternoon traffic with practiced ease, the faint hum of the engine blending with the ambient sounds outside. Despite the calm exterior, Simone was restless. The events on the plane weren't just isolated moments of disrespect. They represented a larger issue that needed to be addressed. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. It was Marcus calling this time. She swiped to answer, his familiar voice instantly grounding her. "Hey, Simone," Marcus said, his tone steady. "I just got off the phone with the airline's executive team. They're taking this seriously." Simone sighed, her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm glad they're taking action, but this goes beyond one flight attendant's behavior, Marcus. People like Cheryl don't act this way in a vacuum. It's about the culture that allows this kind of thing to happen." Marcus hummed thoughtfully on the other end. "You're absolutely right. That's why I'm pushing for more than just a disciplinary action. I've suggested a full review of their training programs and policies. If they're serious about accountability, they need to show it." Simone smiled faintly. Marcus always knew how to cut to the heart of a problem. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know you'll handle it." "Always," Marcus replied. "But I want you to focus on your meeting today. Let me worry about the rest." Simone nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I'll try," she said with a small laugh, though she knew her thoughts would continue to circle back to the incident. They exchanged a few more words before ending the call. As the car pulled up to the hotel, Simone's focus shifted. She stepped out and was greeted by a hotel concierge who guided her to her room with practiced precision. The suite was luxurious but understated, just the way Simone liked it. She placed her bag on the bed and sat down, her laptop already open in front of her. Despite Marcus's reassurances, Simone couldn't let the matter rest. She opened a blank document and began drafting an email to the airline's CEO. If the company truly valued its passengers, they needed to hear her story directly. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, recounting the details of her experience, but this time she framed it in a broader context. She highlighted how small moments of disrespect, left unchecked, could snowball into larger systemic issues. She emphasized the importance of fostering a culture of inclusion and respect, not just for passengers like her, but for everyone. By the time she finished, the email was lengthy but precise. Simone read it over twice, tweaking the wording until it captured exactly what she wanted to convey. Satisfied, she hit send, a sense of calm washing over her. Later that evening, Simone's meeting with the energy firm went smoothly, her professionalism and expertise shining through despite the morning's turbulence. By the time she returned to her hotel, she felt a small sense of accomplishment. But as she sat down to unwind, her thoughts inevitably drifted back to Cheryl and the flight. Simone's phone buzzed again, this time with an unexpected email. The sender was Victoria Green, the VP of Customer Relations she had spoken to earlier. Subject: follow up on today's incident. Dear Ms. Avery, thank you again for taking the time to share your experience with us earlier today. I wanted to provide you with an update on the actions we've taken so far. After reviewing the situation and speaking with the crew, it's clear that Cheryl's behavior was unacceptable and does not reflect our values as an airline. She has been placed on administrative leave pending a thorough investigation. In addition, we have initiated a review of our customer service training program to ensure our staff are equipped to provide the highest level of respect and professionalism to all passengers. We value your feedback and will keep you updated on our progress. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further concerns. Sincerely, Victoria Green, Vice President, Customer Relations ***. Simone read the email twice, her emotions a mix of satisfaction and skepticism. While she appreciated the swift action, she knew that true change would take more than a single investigation or a revised training program. Still, it was a start. The next morning, Simone awoke to another surprise. Her email to the airline's CEO had been forwarded to their entire executive team, and a personal response awaited her inbox. Subject: a personal apology and a commitment to change. Dear Ms. Avery, first, allow me to express my deepest apologies for the experience you endured on your flight. I have personally reviewed your account, and it is clear that our team fell short of the standards we strive to uphold. Your feedback has illuminated areas where we must do better, not only in addressing individual behavior, but in fostering a culture that prioritizes respect and dignity for all. As CEO, I am committed to ensuring that every member of our staff embodies the values we stand for. To that end, we will be implementing a company-wide initiative focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Additionally, we are launching an anonymous reporting system to empower passengers and employees to speak up against any form of discrimination or misconduct. Please know that your voice has sparked meaningful change within our organization. I would also like to invite you to join our advisory panel for this initiative, as your insights would be invaluable in shaping our efforts. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention and for holding us accountable. Sincerely, James Lockwood, Chief Executive Officer ***. Simone stared at the email, her chest tightening with a mix of emotions. The offer to join the advisory panel caught her off guard. She wasn't sure if she wanted to take on such a role, but the gesture was significant. It showed that her voice had been heard and that her actions were already making an impact. Over the next few days, Simone found herself reflecting on the events more deeply. She thought about Cheryl, not with anger, but with curiosity. What had led her to behave that way? Was it a personal bias, or was she simply burned out from the pressures of her job? Simone wondered if Cheryl would use this experience as a wake-up call, an opportunity to grow. Simone also thought about the passengers who had witnessed the incidents. Did they see themselves in her, or in Cheryl? Did the moment inspire them to speak up in their own lives, or to question their own assumptions? She hoped so. Ultimately, Simone knew this was just the beginning of a larger journey. The spark had been lit, and now it was up to her, and others, to keep the flame burning. As she drafted her response to James Lockwood, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her experience. It was about creating a world where everyone was treated with the respect they deserved. With that thought, Simone began to type, her words carrying the weight of both her frustrations and her hope for change. Ripples in the air. Simone sat in her hotel room, gazing at the glowing cityscape of Dallas through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The response from James Lockwood, the CEO, lingered in her mind. His invitation to join the airline's advisory panel wasn't just a gesture. It was a call to action, a chance to turn her experience into something meaningful. As much as Simone craved closure, she knew the story wasn't over. It wasn't just about Cheryl or even the airline. It was about challenging a culture of quiet acceptance in the face of bias and disrespect. With her laptop open, Simone began drafting a response to Lockwood. She crafted her words carefully, ensuring her message reflected both gratitude and determination. Subject: a personal apology and a commitment to change. Dear Mr. Lockwood, thank you for your thoughtful and timely response. I appreciate the steps your team has taken thus far, including your decision to launch a company-wide initiative focused on equity and respect. I accept your invitation to join the advisory panel. I believe my experience, as well as my professional background in building inclusive work environments, can contribute meaningfully to this effort. However, I must emphasize that meaningful change requires more than training programs. It requires accountability, transparency, and a shift in organizational culture. I hope to work with you and your team to not only address the symptoms of these issues, but to dig deeper into their root causes. Let's ensure that no passenger or employee feels dismissed, disrespected, or invisible again. Sincerely, Simone Avery. Simone hit send, her heart lighter with the knowledge that she was taking action. It wasn't her usual way to step into the spotlight, but this moment demanded it. Her principles, and the countless others who faced similar struggles, deserved her voice. As the email was sent, Simone's phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Marcus, saw Lockwood's email. Joining the panel is the right move. Proud of you, as always. Dinner later to celebrate. Simone smiled, replying quickly. Simone, celebrating change. I'm in. See you tonight. The next morning, Simone woke to an inbox flooded with messages. Lockwood had responded to her email with enthusiasm, setting up the first advisory panel meeting for the following week. He also shared details of their initial actions, including Cheryl's administrative leave and the broader rollout of new employee training modules. But it wasn't just Lockwood's email that caught Simone's attention. Overnight, news of the incident had leaked online. A fellow passenger on the flight had recorded snippets of Cheryl's interactions with Simone and shared them on social media. The video, captioned "Disrespect in First Class, a lesson in assumptions," quickly went viral. It showcased Cheryl's dismissive attitude and Simone's composed but firm response. The comments section exploded with opinions. Some praised Simone for her grace and strength, while others condemned Cheryl's behavior outright. Many shared similar stories of being judged, dismissed, or mistreated. The video had struck a chord, igniting a broader conversation about respect, bias, and accountability in customer service. By mid-morning, the story had made national headlines. Simone's phone buzzed nonstop with calls, messages, and interview requests. Her assistant, Danielle, who managed her public image, called to discuss the situation. Simone, we need to decide how to handle this, Danielle said. The media is dying to talk to you, but I know you prefer to stay out of the spotlight. What's the move? Simone sighed, pacing the room. I don't want this to turn into a media circus, Danielle. This isn't about me. It's about the bigger issue. Let's release a statement, something concise but impactful. I'll share my perspective. But I want the focus to stay on the importance of change. Got it, Danielle replied. I'll draft something and send it your way for approval. Within an hour, Simone's official statement was live on her company's website and social media channels. Statement from Simone Avery. Recent events on a flight I took have highlighted an issue that extends far beyond one individual or one company. Bias, whether subtle or overt, has no place in customer service or anywhere else. I want to thank those who have shown support and shared their own stories. Your voices remind us all that respect is a universal right, not a privilege. I am working directly with the airline's leadership to address these issues and help create a culture where dignity and inclusion are standard practices. This is about more than one flight. It's about making every interaction a step toward understanding and respect. Together, we can spark meaningful change. The statement was met with widespread support. It was shared thousands of times, with comments flooding in from people across the world. Many shared their gratitude, while others urged Simone to keep pushing for systemic change. Meanwhile, Cheryl's life had taken a dramatic turn. The airline had placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation, and she found herself at the center of a social media storm. Cheryl hadn't anticipated her actions would be so publicly scrutinized, and now she was forced to reflect on her behavior. Sitting in her modest apartment, Cheryl scrolled through the comments on the viral video. Some defended her, claiming she might have been having a bad day, while others tore her apart, accusing her of outright prejudice. For the first time, Cheryl began to question her assumptions. Why had she treated Simone differently? Was it subconscious bias, or something she had absorbed from years of working in a high-pressure, often hierarchical environment? Cheryl's phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. It was Jamie, the young flight attendant who had stepped in to assist Simone during the flight. Jamie. Hey, Cheryl. I saw the news. Are you okay? Let me know if you want to talk. Cheryl stared at the message for a long moment. She didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, she felt truly exposed. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. As the week progressed, the conversation continued to grow. Major news outlets invited experts to discuss implicit bias, customer service, and the need for systemic change. Simone's name became synonymous with grace under pressure and the power of standing up for what's right. The airline, for its part, moved swiftly. Lockwood announced a series of new initiatives, including a dedicated task force to address discrimination and bias. He also made a public statement, acknowledging the incident and committing to transparency as the company worked toward meaningful change. For Simone, the week was a whirlwind, but as she sat down to dinner with Marcus that Friday night, she finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The restaurant was warm and inviting, a quiet haven from the chaos of the week. "To change," Marcus said, raising his glass. "And to you, for sparking it." Simone smiled, clinking her glass against his. "To all of us," she replied, "for making it happen." The clinking of glasses was a small sound, but in that moment, it felt like the echo of something much larger, the beginning of a ripple that would continue to spread. A legacy of change. A week after the whirlwind of events began, Simone sat in the boardroom of Nexus headquarters in New York City. The room was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the skyline. Simone, however, was focused on the group of individuals seated around the table. This was the first meeting of the advisory panel proposed by James Lockwood, and the energy in the room was palpable. The panel included a mix of airline executives, diversity and inclusion experts, customer service professionals, and even a few passengers who had come forward with their own stories of bias and mistreatment. Simone was seated at the head of the table, her calm demeanor commanding respect. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. "We're not just here to talk about what went wrong. We're here to build something better. This isn't just about addressing one incident. It's about creating a culture of respect, dignity, and accountability that permeates every level of this organization." The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air. Lockwood, seated to her right, nodded, his expression serious. "Simone's right. This is a pivotal moment for us as a company. What we do here will set the standard for how we move forward, not just for our airline, but for the industry as a whole." Simone took a deep breath and continued. "Our work here isn't going to be easy. Change never is, but it's necessary. I want to start by hearing from everyone in this room. What do you believe is the root cause of these issues, and how can we address them effectively?" For the next 2 hours, the group engaged in an intense but productive discussion. Some pointed to gaps in training and accountability, while others highlighted systemic biases that often went unnoticed. One passenger, a middle-aged teacher named Anita, shared a particularly moving story of being overlooked during an emergency because of assumptions about her capabilities. "I was the only person in my row who knew CPR," Anita said, her voice trembling slightly. "But the flight attendant skipped over me and asked the man next to me for help. He didn't know what to do, but they assumed he did because he looked the part." Simone nodded, her chest tightening at Anita's words. "Thank you for sharing that, Anita. It's stories like these that remind us why this work is so important." The conversation shifted to actionable solutions. Suggestions ranged from enhanced training programs and mentorship opportunities to the creation of anonymous reporting systems and employee resource groups. By the end of the meeting, the group had outlined a comprehensive plan that included short-term actions and long-term initiatives. Lockwood stood to address the room as the meeting concluded. "I want to thank each of you for your honesty and insight. Simone, your leadership has been invaluable, and I'm confident that with your guidance, we can turn this moment into a movement." As the panel disbanded, Simone felt a sense of accomplishment, but knew the work was just beginning. She lingered in the boardroom, gathering her notes, when Lockwood approached her. "Simone," he said, his tone softer now, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, looking up from her papers. "Why did you agree to join this panel? You could have just accepted our apology and moved on, but you chose to get involved. Why?" Simone smiled faintly, her gaze thoughtful. "Because this isn't just about me. It's about all the people who've been dismissed, disrespected, or made to feel invisible. I've been given a platform, and it would be irresponsible not to use it. Change doesn't happen by waiting for someone else to take the lead. Lockwood nodded, clearly moved by her words. I'm glad you did. We're lucky to have you. Over the next several months, the initiatives discussed in that first panel meeting began to take shape. The airline launched an industry-first equity and respect training program, which included immersive workshops, scenario-based learning, and regular assessments. Employees at all levels, from frontline staff to executives, participated, with Simone consulting on the program's design. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of an anonymous reporting system called Voices for Change. The system allowed passengers and employees alike to report instances of bias or mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Within weeks of its launch, the airline began receiving valuable feedback, which they used to refine their policies and practices. Cheryl's situation was also resolved during this time. After completing an intensive training program and engaging in a series of restorative justice sessions, she was allowed to return to work. Cheryl reached out to Simone privately, requesting a meeting to apologize in person. Simone agreed to the meeting, curious about what Cheryl had to say. They met in a quiet conference room at the airline's headquarters. Cheryl looked nervous, her usually confident demeanor replaced by humility. Ms. Avery, Cheryl began, her voice trembling slightly. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I judged you unfairly, and I let my own biases affect how I treated you. There's no excuse for that. Simone studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. I appreciate your apology, Cheryl, but what matters more is what you do moving forward. Have you thought about how you can use this experience to make a difference? Cheryl nodded, her eyes welling up. I have. I started mentoring new hires, focusing on empathy and respect. I've also volunteered to share my story during training sessions so others can learn from my mistakes. Simone's expression softened. That's a good start. Growth isn't about being perfect. It's about learning and doing better. I hope you keep that in mind. Cheryl nodded again, gratitude evident in her face. Thank you for giving me a chance. Months turned into a year, and the impact of Simone's advocacy became undeniable. Passenger satisfaction scores rose, and employee engagement improved significantly. The airline's efforts were recognized by industry leaders, and other companies began adopting similar initiatives. Simone, meanwhile, continued to serve on the advisory panel while balancing her responsibilities at Nexus Tech. The experience had been transformative, not just for the airline, but for her as well. It reminded her of the power of standing up, speaking out, and refusing to accept the status quo. One evening, Simone found herself reflecting on the journey. She sat in her living room, a cup of tea in hand, as Marcus joined her. You've done something incredible, Marcus said, sitting beside her. You turned a moment of disrespect into a movement for change. Simone smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. It wasn't just me. It was everyone. The panel, the passengers who shared their stories, even Cheryl. Change takes a collective effort. Marcus nodded, his arm wrapping around her. Still, you were the spark. Simone closed her eyes, her heart full. She didn't set out to be a catalyst for change, but life had a way of presenting opportunities in unexpected ways, and when it did, she knew the only choice was to rise to the occasion. Because sometimes, all it took was one spark to light a fire that could illuminate the world.